And just going to give you a really brief slideshow to kind of put you back into those days, if it's possible. And then the panelists are going to take you really back in a time machine. And when I think about the events that we've done in the last few years, from the Alto event on up to the Homebrew event and whatnot, what emerges is this kind of soup, this kind of milieu of what was going on in the mid-'70s. And I was a nerd kid in the mid-'70s. I actually went to Sunnyvale. I'm from Canada, if you can't tell. You might have thought I was Minnesotan, but no. I'm from the Great Pink North. So we came down. I was in the spring of '75, staying in Cupertino, actually in Sunnyvale, but I didn't know anything of this was going on around me. But I kind of picked up on the vibe that was in the Bay Area in the mid-'70s, and I said to myself when I was a 13-year-old kid, you know, not much older than a couple of you guys there, that I wanted to come back and live here, and that's how I ended up coming back and living here. And so I kind of had a sense for that, but of course any of us who were in school, whatnot, in that period, and we started, even if we were in the hinterlands like me, you got the personal computers eventually. Eventually it came and trickled down to you. But I'm just gonna give you an idea of this soup, and I think of it as a kind of a baking exercise. So we'll go to the next slide. So you want to cook up an industry? It's easy. Just follow this convenient recipe. First, the ingredients. You gotta have good ingredients. And well, what do we have in oh, lights. Chris, are you there? Can you shove the lights down? Oh, there we go. There we are. Ah, beautiful. Easier to see. So, ingredients. What do you need to cook up an incredible gourmet dish to create an industry? Well, you need extraordinary people. Too many people to list that were involved in this industry, of course, but some of the people we have here today were some of those extraordinary people. You need inspiring places. Well, Homestead High in the lower left. That's Homestead High in 1974, folks. Without all the fancy media centers that it has now, but maybe it had the big swimming pool. And extraordinary places. Hewlett-Packard, there's HP 35. Extraordinary machine, extraordinary people, extraordinary place. Atari, we all know what an impact that had. It was kind of in a way a bridge from the big company like HP into the world of people using computers. And there's another extraordinary place. That's the garage in Los Altos. That's the Jobs Family Garage. Extraordinary place. And you had deeply felt nerdly passions. There's a little screenshot of Lee Felsenstein last year waving his yardstick at the Homebrew Club. And you had down there, this is an excerpt from Rich Today's Finite State Fantasies. It's the cartoon about a kid who's building his homebrew kit. So late at night, with everyone shut out of the room. Anyway, so that's ingredients. The next slide. You need recipes. Well, one of the great early recipes was Build a TV Typewriter by Don Lancaster. I know Woz will be able to explain about this, and I think Daniel will be able to comment a little bit about, gee, what happens when you combine the TV typewriter recipe with the Altair recipe? What comes out of that? So these are excerpts from Homebrew Computer Club newsletters that we collected last year, and you can see this is the first note is I think from the second newsletter or third, and Woz is building a TV typewriter of his own design. That was a comment from Woz at that meeting. Randy Wigginton is planning to get an Altair 8800 to play games. I don't know if that happened. Anyway, so recipes. You got to have them, and they were floating around. Next slide. Kitchens. Well, we talked about the garages. There are very few pictures I could find of sort of inside garages, but I found this from a Fortune magazine article. There's Steve Jobs standing in front of the garage, and that's sometime in the 80s. And then this is supposedly a picture inside the garage in '76. I don't really know what that shows. It's sort of stuff stuck on the wall. This is purportedly a picture of Woz's workbench in '76, and maybe you can verify if that's a reconstruction or is it the real thing. Anyway, there we have it. Next picture. And you, of course, have to have chefs if you're going to make a fine dish. And here's the various collection of pictures of our chefs then and now. And I think the one that that's sort of most endearing, I think, is the number 26 there with Woz, with the actual blue box, and it is colored blue, in fact. So it must have been the blue box. And if you see the one in the lower center, that's at the West Coast Computer Fair. And there's a whole series of pictures taken by Tom Munneke, who sent them to me. Anyway, and then up in the upper right there, there's Steve Jobs this year doing a commemoration of 30th event at Macworld in the spring. So, and I think that this one in the upper left is Steve Jobs looking at a blue box. It's always purported to be that on, I think that was from woz.org. Anyway, just a great collection of then and now of the chefs. So next slide. And cooking it up. Very few of these around. It took me a long time to find on the net an actual Apple I schematic, but there it is. It was from an article many years ago, and there's some of Woz's notes there. I think it's a 6502 floating point add, sub, mul, and div. Little handwritten notes there from March 676. So maybe that was something for the Homebrew Club. I don't know in particular, maybe just your own notes. Oh, the whole manual is, oh, the manual right there, so we could actually figure it out. Oh, these are the 6502 routines that Woz handed out at Homebrew. For doing floating point. Here we are. Okay, so.
Sorry, I forgot my white gloves.
Okay. So. Okay. We are in the museum. So here's the whole schematic, the whole scoop.
So if you want to see it, it's here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Liza. Next slide. And hot out of the oven. Apple I. This is a photo from Salam from about 4 or 5 years ago. And you said there was a bent pin on it. You could tell if it was that came from you. I think we. And I'm always curious as to why it says Apple Computer 1, Palo Alto, California. Did Palo Alto have much to do with it? I'm not sure. Sort of the neighboring communities? Mailing address. Oh. Answering service was there. Okay, there we go. Solved. Next slide. And then the gorgeous one everybody knows, the Smithsonian one. And I know I read somewhere how that someone's dad made this case lovingly. No? Okay, we'll hear about that on the panel. That's a good question for the panel. Where did this gorgeous case come from? Next slide. And here's, out of the oven, here's Apple I running. And I believe it's just, you're doing a dump of the addresses, right? You're getting a dump of the memory. And then, is that a program that's running to output the whole character set, I think? Yep, yes it is. Okay. So he was just reading the hex there and reverse compiling on the fly. Impressive. Okay, next slide. And this, as I spoke about earlier, at the the serving of the apple, the first public show, and there's Daniel Kotke and Steve Jobs in Atlantic City, New Jersey on August 28th, 1976. And you can just sort of see a little computer in the right on that's a little placard there, and perhaps that's marketing literature or tech specs behind them. But that's a great photo there. And of course, I'm wearing that T-shirt there. And the great Apple Computer logo, which I'm sure the panelists will explain where that comes from. So such a beautiful piece of art. And next slide. And what's interesting about this, although the projector's munging this a little bit, is when you look at this first literature, this first sort of spec sheet or ad for the Apple I, it really looks like an Apple ad of today. It's got that Times Roman font on the top and very clear explanations, and you know, it seems like it's Apple. Apple's had that consistency all these 30 years. And price is $666.66, and I'm sure the guys will explain that, is this indeed the mark of the beast? Which I don't think it was. I think it was just repeating numbers were easier to remember. Anyway, next slide. So we've kind of blown our schedule here, but we're basically going to let the panelists sit up. We're going to when we finish this, turn off the projector, let the panelists sit up here and just start to talk. And after a certain amount of time, when it seems to make sense, we'll open it up for a story period. If anyone has a story, keep it under 2 minutes to blurt out. I know Crunch has a story, which will probably be under 2 minutes, but he will blurt that out and for all to enjoy. And we'll do some kind of mapping or random access, so if anybody else could stand up. This is Lee Felsenstein Homebrew Club term. Just say anything that you want to connect with other people, say around the Apple history. And we're really looking for people who have pictures and video and, well, not maybe a little bit less video, but anything that we can scan in for artifacts for our pages to offer to the world under our Creative Commons license about Apple's early history. There isn't a whole lot on the web, and there needs to be more. There's some excellent books about it, but there needs to be more artifacts. And if you have photo albums of slides or whatever, or pictures of things at Apple in 76, 77, or anything, there's a bunch of us that want to scan those in. If you're okay them being offered for non-commercial use off the Digibarn pages, this is why I do these events, to gather more cyber archives. We're going to do the lovely cape cutting. People will mill about, and general confusion will prevail. Alan Lindell and Daniel will be sequestering some people for interviews. And at 9 p.m., Woz will finally finish talking to people and signing their iWoz books and Apple II covers, which would happen last year. Now, I think Woz is feeling a little under the weather, so he may be leaving before 9 p.m. So we'll let him be the best judge of that. So next slide. So there's the cake cutting from last year, and it's up here, and you'll all get your sugar highs from this. That was the homebrew cake. This year we have Apple at 30, this logo on the cake. Great cake, thank you, Safeway. And it might be the last slide, but keep going. Thanks to, and all these people here, all these magazines that we took pictures and covers from, people who've helped, the speakers, etc., and also to Jeff Raskin, who many of you knew. This is one of the last pictures that I took of Jeff, and one of the last things that he did to benefit me is to show him the Apple one that Steve Wozniak gave him. And it's sitting right up here. Thank you, Linda. Next one. Oh, don't forget the shameless plug. Digibarn Computer Museum. We're up in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Nerd buys farm 8 years ago. Nerd walking around farm notices there's a 5,000 square foot barn there they didn't notice before. What does Nerd do with barn? Wife loves pigs. So potbelly pigs go in the outside horse stalls. Nerd walking around on the inside of barn says, I could store old computer junk in here. Hence the beginning of, and I happen to have a Felton Tarrant comptometer from 1922, which will look really good sitting right there, beginning of Digibarn. Nerd goes over to Xerox PARC for last demo of Xerox Star and says, this can't be the last demo of the Xerox Star. Nerd finds all old Xerox hardware to assemble and get working to continue the Xerox story, and then discovers you got to tell everything else too. So there's now about 400, 450 systems there, Cray supercomputers down to little itty bitty things, and it's all a community-based project. It's mostly they sort of work if you're lucky kind of thing, but you can boot up the artifacts. The whole Digibarn is meant as a story capture mechanism. The main focus I have is getting your stories onto the site for perpetuity. Because when the people are gone, the artifacts will still be well preserved somewhere, and the people won't be there to tell the stories. So that's what I'm mainly focused on. And so anyway, visit digibarn.com. 3 o'clock tomorrow down in the lobby. I'll hand out maps, and we'll lead the group over to the museum. If you want to stay after about 6 o'clock, we'll go out and have a brew at the brewery. The Boulder Creek Brewery, a very fine brewery. And I think that's, and now we're segueing into the real reason we're here, and our panelists. And my wife Galen hit me upside the head last year and said, you didn't introduce anybody. How does anybody know who these people are? I said, they don't know who they are. I said, you have to read bios. So I promised her I will read bios. I won't read my bio or Salam's bio, but the wonderful people we have here today, the short bios are Steve Wozniak. Well, he's the Woz. But I should really tell you a little bit more about him. Steve Wozniak is a Silicon Valley Steve, founder and chairman for the past few decades, Steve Wozniak is currently founder and chairman and CEO of Wheels of Zeus. And he helped shape the computing industry from the design of Apple's first line of products, Apple I and II, and influenced the popular Macintosh. For his achievements at Apple Computers, Steve was awarded the National Medal of Technology by the President of the U.S. in 1985, the highest honor bestowed on America's leading innovators. Making significant investments of both his time and resources in education, Wozniak adopted the Los Gatos School District, providing students and teachers with hands-on teaching and donations of state-of-the-art technology equipment. So that's a great, great, generous thing to do for next generation. Daniel Conti, personal friend of mine, and instrumental in getting this together today. Daniel, and I wrote this, so this is sort of an unofficial bio. Daniel told me he was hired by Woz and Jobs to help assemble Apple I boards, or test them, I guess, and I was incorrect, for those who purchased the assembled versions, and joined the effort in the garage on June 30th, 1976. I guess this was when the bike store had put in that huge order, or was it after? Just after. Daniel went on to a great career at Apple, which included working on the Apple II and III, and being a member of the legendary Macintosh team. Find his signature embossed in the insides of the early Macintosh cases. Randy Wigginton. Randy was one of Apple's first employees, creator of Mac Write, Full Impact, and other numerous Mac applications. Wigginton was a student at Homestead High in Cupertino, California, interested in computers, just as the earliest microprocessor-based computers were being assembled by hobbyists. He had heard about the Homebrew Computer Club, but no way to get there until he started getting rides with another club member, Steve Wozniak. The two hit it off. By the way, thank you, Wikipedia, for these. The two hit it off, and Wigginton became one of Apple's earliest employees in 1976. Was present with Woz when the Apple I was first presented to the world at the Homebrew Club meeting. Wigginton collaborated with Wozniak on the circuit design and ROM software for the Apple II in 1977. As Woz wired up the colored graphic circuitry, Wigginton wrote machine language graphic subroutines. Chris Espinoza, another high school student, wrote demo programs in BASIC. Wigginton wrote several early programs for the Apple II, including the checkbook balancing program, co-authored with Apple's Vice President of Marketing, Mike Markula. Is Mike Markula here? Did Mike come? Sure. Chris Espinoza, who's just been mentioned, was one of Apple's first employees. He joined the company at the age of 15 in 1976. He rode his bike down here when it was still housed in Steve's parents' garage, writing software manuals and coding after school. Espinoza entered the University of California, Berkeley, where his freshman advisor was Andy Hertzfeld. See all the connections, and Andy's sitting right up here too. Thank you for coming, Andy. In 1981, Espinoza became a member of the Apple Macintosh team. He has worked on many projects at Apple since, including macOS, AUX, HyperCard, Intelligent, Kaleido Labs, AppleScript, and macOS 10. He's now a development engineering manager of the Xcode team. So he's now starting his fourth decade at Apple. Impressive. So with that, I think plenty of introductions, plenty of background. What we'll have is we'll shut off the projector so people don't get blown into light space. And we'll move some chairs up front. And basically, the front is pretty open. Some questions that come up during the introduction, maybe you guys can answer, like who created that wonderful logo for Apple, and who carved that case that's in the Smithsonian. And then we can just sort of take it from there. It's really, it's your panel, it's your history. And after maybe about 45 minutes or so, we'll open it up for the story, the co-storytelling. So I'd ask everyone, they can keep their comments till we've done that, till you guys have felt you talked yourselves out. And maybe some of the key questions to ask was, why Apple? Why was Apple the company that kind of punched through and created that critical mass? It's the right product at the right time with the right people to make it so that it just spread beyond the hobbyist world. You know, why Apple? What were the ingredients to the soup? And was there any point in which you thought that Apple just was not going to happen? Maybe in the first 2 years where it was real touch and go, because those are kind of the cliffhanger moments. And and what saved you, what kept you going? Was it people, technology, infusion of cash? You know, when Apple was just sort of this fragile entity, what kept Apple in the scope? And kind of looking back, how do you think of the industry today and the innovation people can do today? Are there garages left? Do people still do the garage things? It's still possible to do something in your garage. Maybe it's in your Ajax browser is your garage, your Ajax code base. Is the garage still a source of innovation that it was? And with that, I think let's drag some chairs over. Chief Cook